Hello and welcome to a lecture on authentication and account management. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about the different types of authentication credentials that you should have to access a network. We'll talk about the single sign-on and what they can do for you. And then we're going to spend some time talking about securing passwords because that's very, very important, as I have mentioned before. And we'll talk about the different types of trusted operating systems that there are. Okay, what is authentication? Authentication is the process of ensuring a person desiring to access resources is authentic, validating the identity of the person that wants to have access to your system or the network. So what usually happens, you will have a username and a password in the system on a server somewhere. So when you try to have access, you type in your username and password. Now, if you are over a network, most likely this username and password is sent to the server. And when it's sent to the server, then the server will authenticate, will validate the username and password according to whatever they have in that database. And if you are authenticated, then that server, the Radius server or the TACX server, the ones that we've discussed from the last chapter, they are going to give you other authorizations, will authorize you on to have access to whatever you need to have access. So you have to specify what kind of authorization that this person should have. And then also those servers will keep an account of what you have accessed when you were given authorization, when you logged out, when you logged in, and you can get into a lot of details of what applications were used, what resources you have also used, and things like that, right? So that's authentication. So the different types of credentials, if you can have these three different layers, by the way, that would be great. For example, something that you have, something about who you are, or something you know. So for example, something you have, a key fob or lock key or your ATM cards. You have to have something with you to have access. About what you are, maybe face recognition, voice recognition. You have to say something. And what you know, something that you can remember, like a password, right? Or a PIN number to your ATM card. So if you have all those three to have access to a specific location, let's say you're coming into a building where you have to scan, you have to have a badge, scan it. So for that, the card won't be able to get in. Then they ask you for the PIN, and maybe they'll scan your thumb or your eye retina, or you have to say something. Those three things you have to have before you gain entrance. All right, so user logging into a system will be asked to identify themselves. They prompt you for a password, and then you have to type that in. When you type that in, if you are on a local machine, your system may hash that. Most likely, when it comes to password, those passwords are hashed, and then they're compared with the ciphertext that is saved on your computer, or maybe you send the hash over to the server. You never really want to send the password in clear text to the server. Remember, if somebody captures that hash, that ciphertext on the way, if you remember from the encryption chapter, you won't be able to decipher what the password is, to figure out what the password is, right? That's why you need it to be authenticated. Don't ever send clear text. An example, if you use Telnet, Telnet sends the password to the server or to the location that you need to be authenticated in clear text. Secured shell SSH, it's encrypted. So what's that? So that is an advantage. What could be a problem of sending a clear text? Well, if somebody's just running Wireshark, it's a protocol analyzer, a sniffer, the one that scans the network to see the traffic that's flowing, and it will be able to capture your password, right? So you do not want to send a password in clear text. All right, so password are, they're very easy. Here's the thing with passwords that you need to know. When you type in your password, number one, we'll talk about the link to the password later on. Make sure when you log into a system with your password, that you look around, make sure there's no cameras, nobody sitting on somewhere away from you that has a camera, and they can actually zoom into your keyboard and find out what keystrokes, and they could be recording it, believe it or not. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you never know. Somebody's, looking over your, shoulder trying to find out. We call that shoulder surfing, trying to find out what you are typing. So, especially if you are in a public place. So, look who's around you when you're trying to access the, try to type in a password. I'm assuming that you're typing your password on your own laptop or your own computer. Okay. And if it's not your own computer, never ever, if you're using a public computer or someone else's computer, even the computers in school, colleges, but whatever, airports or anybody that offers you a laptop to have access to get on the internet or somebody else's laptop or somebody else's phone or whatever, and you need to take a look at something, you can check your emails if you want to. If you don't think those things are important to you, you want to make sure that you do not access sensitive websites such as your bank, credit card companies, maybe your school. Um, Try to avoid all of that because those devices that you are trying to use may have what? Keyloggers, right? Keyloggers could be a software that's running in the background and it's capturing everything that you are typing. So just think about that and be very, very careful. So what I want you to do is if you want to access any specific websites that you deem to be important to you and very, very sensitive and is going to cause maybe financial harm, is to use your own laptop that no one else uses and make sure, and it's preferable that you do it at home on your own secured wireless network, the one that are secured with WPA2, right? So that's where you access your, don't access everything, whenever you are traveling. You can check your emails when you're outside using even your own device. You want to be as safe as possible. So that's when it comes to weaknesses. Now, also, your passwords, never ever, is rule number two. I want you to write this down, in fact, when it comes to passwords. So, number one, I want you never um, access sensitive websites on public PCs or friends' devices, I should say, not even PCs. That's number one. Number two, look around you when you are trying to type in your password, right? Look for hidden cameras or somebody's watching you or whatever. Or sit next to a wall where there's nobody behind you. Number three, your passwords have to have at a minimum 10 characters with uppercase, lowercase letters, and some numbers. And with that point, I want you to also use a phrase. Do not use words. So use a phrase with some numbers in it. So for example, I love double James Bond 007. Or you can use, if that's something that you love. So you write that down or whatever. And it has some numbers in it. You can put some capital letters in there, or a phrase that you always think of that no one else except you comes to mind. It reminds you of something. If you went on a trip and you liked something and you can put it into a phrase with some numbers in it, perfect. Okay, so what I want you, that's number three. Number four, I want you to create 4 to 5 different passwords. There are long, like I told you, 10 to 15 characters and phrases. and I want you to prioritize them. Put one and categorize them. Password number one is going to be for the most sensitive websites places that I go to, and then less sensitive, and then less sensitive, and the last one all the way on the bottom will be the least sensitive web places or websites that you go to. So, for example, if you want to go to your bank or your credit card company or something that is financial, that is extremely important to you, and you don't want it to be lost, you use one password, number one password. Maybe a little less sensitive, maybe your school password. That will be used number two. That number two password, which should be completely different than number one. Number three password will be maybe, I don't know, your email, and so on. The least password all the way on the bottom, number five, the one that you would, let's say you go on the internet and you want to get something and they ask you for it to register. So you would type in your username and password, and in case it got lost, who cares? Or somebody stole it, they will not be able to access any of your other websites. That's the whole reason behind this. If you use the same password to access everything, because once they find your password, they're going to scan all the banks in the United States with the username and password, and they'll just tell them, I forgot my username. Bingo, they get in, and they'll do it very quickly. Or your credit card companies. So don't ever use your password, the same password for every site. Now, so five different passwords, and they should be strong and long. And then the last thing is periodically, if you think that your password has been compromised, you should definitely change it. Um, how do you change it? It's really, if you think of something new and you are good with it, um, change it. Um, and the reason I go with five password, because I've read articles, the past I think 5 years, and I read it twice in different locations, and that's what they recommend. You don't have to create a password for every single website that you go to, because then it's very hard to manage. And the last point that I want you to write down when it comes to password is never ever write them down, and never, of course, tell people what your password are. Don't give your credentials to anyone, social security numbers or anything like that, where they can use that information to reset your password. Okay? Once you're aware of this, I think you should be safe. And please let others know. Tell your friends, tell your family members how to secure their password, because we're talking about over 5 billion of dollars are lost in identity theft, and mostly most systems are cracked because of poor password management. All right, so that's what I want you to write when it comes down to passwords. So from social engineering, people can ask for questions. They don't have to ask you directly. They may ask somebody that knows you and gather information about you, and then use that information to reset your password, right? When it comes to guessing your password, that's forget it. Nobody's going to bother that. Once you type in a phrase, a long password, it's almost impossible to crack. And that's by guessing your password real means brute force. Just run a program on it that it keeps guessing your password on over and over and over again. And the way to do that is to make a program to really, after three guesses, to knock you out, to really break that infinite loop of guessing your password. That's what brute forcing is. They may take the database, your password, and steal it and take it outside. Because sometimes what servers do when they save your username and password, the passwords are saved using a hash program. They just put the numbers in there, the ciphertext, the hash. And when you type in your password, they run the hash and they compare it with the hash that they have in the database. They don't put the actual password. So if your password is a dictionary word, somebody just goes into the server, grabs all the hashes, not the passwords. They won't be even be able to get the password. But what he's going to do is he's going to go through the whole dictionary word for word, run a hash on it, and compare it with any of the hashes in the server. If there's a match, he got your password, right? So never ever use a dictionary word because they could do this offline cracking. You know, they grab the whole thing and go out and put it on the machine and run the hashes on them. So you don't want. But if your password is long, he's not going to be able to he's not going to be able to figure out to run. He has to run a hash on that on your phrase with capital letters, lowercase letters, and some numbers. It's impossible, right? Especially if it's long enough. All right, so that's the dictionary password when you're going offline. All right, the rainbow tables. Okay, so stay away from dictionary words, right? Because they can crack your password in minutes, and with today's computing power. There are rainbow tables out there, set of a whole bunch of passwords, everything that you can think of in a big, huge database. And they can go through this rainbow tables, password that usually people think of. So you got to think of something that is unique to what something that may be a habit that you have, something that you think of, like I told you, something that you relate to, right? All right, so talked about that. And try to avoid, I don't, using the dollar sign for S or the at sign for A. You can use that. Again, stay away from dictionary words. Use phrases, letters and numbers, and I like it to be always 15 characters. That's my preference. I don't mind taking a couple of microseconds to type in a couple of characters when it comes to passwords. All right, so here's another thing that I want you to write down. The general observations to create strong passwords. Don't use a dictionary words. Don't use birthdays. Don't repeat characters. And do not use short passwords. Okay, write that down. I know I've discussed that, but I want you to write that down again. And I want you to remind yourself and remind others that's what they should follow. All right. So never write down on a piece of paper what your passwords are. I've been places where I've seen password on a sticky note on the top of the computer, on the top of the desktop, or even in the drawers. Um, the whole idea behind the password is to make sure that no one else is looking, right? All right, managing your password. Um, if you have a whole bunch of computers, somebody when you turn your computer on and your operating system boots up, the first thing that you will be prompted to is to type in your username and password. But what I could do is while just before the operating system loads, while they post the power on self test that is enabled as soon as you activate your PC. What I could do is I could hit F12 or whatever the key that I need to press to go into the BIOS, and I'll change the boot sequence so I can boot up from either my flash or my DVD. And then when I reboot, I go to the DVD or the flash, I boot up from there, and I'll have access to your computer and even wipe it out or maybe change the password and gain access. You could do that. So if you're worried about somebody bypassing the username and password that comes up from your operating system, you have to put a password on the BIOS so they are not able to change the BIOS boot sequence, right? So the first thing they're going to encounter is the BIOS boot sequence. They won't be able to get into the BIOS unless they have a password. I remember getting a question on the A+ certification for that. Why do you set a password on the BIOS? To prevent attackers from changing the boot sequence, right? because they won't have access to your system after that. Now remember, if the problem with sending a BIOS password is because if you forgot it, then you won't have access to your BIOS. You're going to have a problem. The only way to reset it, if you need to update the operating system or reload the operating system or whatever, you're going to need the BIOS password. And if, usually we never access the BIOS for a long, long time. We may never need to access it. So when you type in that password, make sure it's write it. This is probably one password that you will have to put it someplace, write it down, and tell the managers or the upper management what the password is, and save it in a locked place that you will have access to if you ever need to. All right? Because otherwise, the only way is to reset the BIOS. Either, if there's a battery, remove the battery, let the BIOS clears out, or maybe some jumping. You have jump wires on the motherboard that will clears the BIOS, reset the BIOS, right? All right. So I want you to write also the following with defenses against password. Don't have your computer unattended. Screensaver should be enabled, right? Password protect the BIOS. This is for, desktops we're talking about. And physically lock the computer case so no one will be able to open it, right? All right. And I think we talked about these. So never write down the password, use a unique password, right? Don't set up a temporary password for other users when they need access. Don't give them your password to access your system. Don't allow your computer to automatically sign in, without a password. You have to be prompted for your username and password, and so on. All right, so on autocomplete, you can use the autocomplete password in IE, so it's encrypted and stored in Windows registry. You can have that. I usually don't do that. I always like, if a website comes up and says, do you want me to save your password so you don't have to do that anymore? I usually don't do that. Even on my own laptop, because I always want to type in the password. I want to remember what it was, because I don't want to end up going to a place and I need to type in the actual password and I forget it. So this way forces me to know to use my password. But if you for example, if you were in school, or uh, I don't know, if you are home and you have a desktop at home and you don't want to keep typing the password and you just want to have, as soon as you go in there, you will have access. That's fine. But if your computer is ever going to be used by someone else, you should not do that. All right. Just give me 1 second. Okay, move on. Okay, talked about that. Okay, so that's that with passwords. Hopefully you'll be able to manage your passwords a little bit better. Now, there are some things that you can have a token. It could be a token is a device with a window display. If you are a remote, this is mostly with remote access, and something similar to what you see right here. If you need access, you'll be sent a token, and you type it in for authentication. Now what they do is they send it to your phone. So you don't need this actual. The token is sent to your phone. Sometimes when I log in from a different computer, the website will say, okay, we need to authenticate who you are. Text me or call me. I ask them to send a text, and they'll send a text, and I type in the token, and I'll gain access to the website that I need to. Right? And that token that they send you will last for 30 to 60 seconds. If you don't use it, then you have to re-authenticate. Right? So when it comes to accessing banks or credit card companies, make sure that you use tokens um, if that server allows you to do that. So don't disable it. If it's on your computer and you don't want to always you need a token, then you can tell them not to, this is my own private computer. You don't have to ask for that second layer of authentication. Okay, so that's that when it comes to tokens. Cards, smart cards, they can contain integrated circuit chip that holds information, just like your credit card companies. Okay, and and the chip that they have on it, um, they have all the information that they need. So they can read the barcodes. I don't like, but the ones with the chip, just like your credit cards, like a little SIM that you just package it in there, and they can read all that information. It's a lot more secured than the strip magnetic card that you have. With the strip card, all they have to do is just, if you have it in your pocket or in your wallet, you just need another device that will be able to read all that information from either the barcode or the magnetic strip. So usually that's not as safe as using the ones with the chip. If you have the chip on it, always use that because it's much harder to get that information from a strip, right? For many years it happens, a waiter will take your credit card, go somewhere to type in the information and charge you for whatever that you bought, or if you had a dinner somewhere, and they maybe, get all the information from your card. He has another device that will scan, capture, your name, your ID, everything from that credit card, and then maybe use it down the road. That's another thing you should always remember. Review everything when you get your credit card statement. Review every single entry in there, right? Don't let anything go. You'll be surprised. Things will come up. They may charge you a couple of bucks here and there without you even knowing, and they'll do it to thousands and thousands of users and pass that information. Especially when you go on vacations, regularly check your credit card statements. Don't just ignore them and pay your bills, right? All right, so that's that with cards. Standard biometrics. Um, with today's mobile devices, you have the face recognitions, voice recognitions, or even your body, use your thumb. All those are good, and they're also backed up by a physical, a password that you have to type in. So if your face is all beat up and you wake up in the morning and your phone doesn't recognize you, you'll be able to type in your password. If you're sick and you can hardly say anything or your voice has changed, you're backed up by a password. If your thumb is wet or dirty or whatever, then you're backed up by a password. So it's definitely good to use the biometric. So use them if they are supported by your device, because that just gives you another layer, and it's much more difficult for somebody to get your device, and they have to have you there for them to gain access. So if you lost your device, it's almost impossible for them to gain access to your system. Okay. All right. So that's that. On the laptops, I don't do this anymore with laptops. They're a pain. I know somebody that had them, and he disabled it. He could not, every time they would need to gain access, and it was a mess. It took him for a while because he wanted to be open his laptop and get busy with it immediately. And I don't know, maybe the scanner was not as good, but I don't see a lot of laptops with these for biometric access. The disadvantages of standard biometrics is the cost, maybe a little bit higher than without, of course. And the readers, especially for the thumb, maybe you get rejected as much, but you're always backed up with a password.
unfortunately. But it's the time to get authenticated may be a pain sometimes. If the if the voice recognitions or the face recognitions is not as good, it may take a little while to authenticate. You want to be authenticated very quickly. The whole idea of using your voice recognition or face recognition is to get in and as quickly as possible. If it's going to take a few minutes, people don't want to be bothered with that. Behavioral biometrics, you can authenticate by normal action of the users. How hard do you hit a key, and how, the flight time between the keys, how fast do you type, computer footprinting, when do you access your computer? If you try to access it at 2 o'clock in the morning, they won't let you because you never did it before, or you may get another layer of authentication because they don't recognize that you actually did that. If somebody's hitting the keys, even though they know password much harder than you do, you may not get authenticated too. So these are tough, the behavior, right? They're good. Please write that down. Behavioral biometric. If your system supports those and those systems, use them. The more, the better, the merrier, right? So if you are within this area when it comes to typing template, you're okay. And if you go outside, then you're not authenticated, even if you know what the password is. Okay, voice recognitions, we talked about that. Computer footprinting, cognitive, we talked about that. Your thought process, what's your understanding of the users when. Um, okay, single sign-ons. The advantages are, okay, please write that down. Single sign-on is using a single password that will enable you to access many different websites. So for example, at the college, when you log in into the main website, you'll have access to, I don't know, your Canvas or Blackboard or whatever, learning system management that you have. You'll have access to your email. You'll have access to, I don't know, whatever resources that you have at college with one password. Okay, so that's good. It saves a lot of time. There are websites that I really, so please just write the first definition of what the single sign on. If you want to write the rest, that's fine. But there is a website that you can go online and you can put all the websites that you gain access, your banks, your school, your credit cards, or any other, excuse me, any other websites that you go to that requires you to have a password. You go and you put all in one password, and all in this one web web location. And when you log into that web location, they ask you for the password. Once you sign in, you'll be signed into your bank, your credit card, your school, and you can access them without having to be authenticated, all of them. But you have to do that initially. Um, it's good, at home. You could do that at home if you want to, and you can go to all the places that you go to without having to retype your password. If you're doing it from home, that's fine on your desktop. It makes it easier and you go in and out, and you never have to remember passwords. It's probably if you're going to have access when you're outside, you probably don't want to use that website. But it's out there. I don't like to use it because I have other people at home that is using the desktop, and I'd like to remember my passwords. And like I told you, remember the 5 passwords that you list. That's probably the best way to go. Windows have a live ID password that they use, designed as an SSO. They allow you to access, for example, Xbox Live, MSN, Office Live. I don't know if it'll allow you to do your password or not. I don't use that either, just to let you know what I do. if you want. There's an open ID out there that decentralized the open system, FIM, and it does not require specific software to be installed, and it's URL-based identity system. That's a free website that you can go to, me.myopenid.com if you want. Uh, I don't know. It's up to you if you want to use that or not. It's I'm really I have no comment on that one. But anyway, account management. When it comes to account management, they can be done by setting the password rules. So, for example, if and when we take the server class, you'll be able to set up user templates, and in the user templates, you set up the requirements for the password, how long they should be, when they are going to expire, if and and periodically you have to change them, how often, how long the password is going to be, um, the time of day, all of that could be sent. And when is the account going to expire? So all of that could be set when you create the user, right? And once you do that, then it's automatic. If you guess the password 3 times wrong, you have to be re-authenticated. And sometimes on web pages, if you get logged out for a day or two sometimes, and you have to, or even you have to call in. So if you guess, some for really secured systems, if you guessed your password 3 times, you get locked out, and the only way to get in is you have to call in, and they have, you call them in, and they take your information, and they reset your password. All right, trusted operating systems. The operating systems have vulnerabilities because the operating system is a huge amount of codes in there. So, so one compromised applications can impact the entire computer. So applications cannot authenticate themselves with each other. If all applications have to go through the operating system. So your operating system has to be very, very secure, right? And I think Microsoft does a pretty good job, especially with the Windows 10 when it comes to security. Well, there's no other operating systems out there that really, really competes with the desktops nowadays anyway. All right, but you got to be very careful if you're worried about systems, that are the other operating systems, run them in a virtual environment, right? Maybe you could have Windows as the base, get a hypervisor such as VirtualBox or VMware, um, and then put all your other operating systems in the virtual environment, Unix, Linux, whatever that you want, even though everyone does a pretty good job. So in case anything that goes down, just take it out, everything else will be fine, right? All right, so that's that. Write everything down that I told you. That's the end of this chapter. So keep up the work, and I'll see you on the next chapter.